So let's talk about the biggest mistakes I used to make when I started training. And I've saved the best one for last, so make sure you stay tuned. The first mistake I used to make was I used to just follow random workouts. I used to just go to the gym and say I'm training chest, not track what I'm training, and just do whatever machine I just felt like doing. I used to just walk in and be like, oh, I'll just try this chest press, or I'll just go on the cables today, or I'll use the dumbbell or the barbell or whatever. None of which I ever tracked. Only time I ever saw progress, and this is something obviously looking back makes sense now, when I followed a strict program. I used to follow something called the 5-3-1 training method by Jim Wendler. That allowed me to see huge strength gains, and I was able to get my bench press up and all this sort of stuff. But before that, I just wasn't tracking anything, and I was just doing whatever willy-nilly, and I had no understanding and no concept of what actually makes sense in the gym or what I should be doing. So mistake number 2 kind of relates to mistake number 1, and that's with logging your workouts. I used to come in and go off how I felt. So I wouldn't have any idea what I would do on that machine the week before. I used to just come in and go, oh, do you know what? That feels heavy. Let's just stick with it. I had no standard rep ranges. I had no standard weight that I was trying to be. I just used to do whatever. And then I used to look in the mirror and think, why am I not making progress? Oh, I'm probably different. I'm not looking after my food properly, whatever the excuse was at the time. So now mistake number 3 kind of relates to mistake number 2, and that is doing too much junk volume. I used to go into the gym, see how I felt, and then just use all the machines. So one day I'd do 6 sets on chest, the next day I'd do 12 sets on chest. And it was just this constantly every single week, just because I saw something on social media or somebody talked about an exercise and so on. So I used to just do too much junk volume all the time, just picking a random exercise and do 4 sets, 5 sets of 12 or whatever. That was always something I used to make. And speaking of rep ranges, that sort of leads me on to the next mistake, which was I used to just finish whenever the reps said 12 or 15. I had no concept of progressive overload. Now I've mentioned that already, but I used to just go on a bicep curl and get to 12 and put the weight down, and I think, oh, well, the program knows better than I do, so I'm just going to finish at 12 and that's it, and just do 4 sets of 12. No wonder I wasn't seeing any progress, because at what point was I progressively overloading? I wasn't. I was just doing whatever, and my muscles were happy to stay at that place because they were never being challenged. Now, this next one is going to be quite a controversial one, but I used to do my compound movements before I used to do my isolations. And if you're interested in finding out about free weights versus machines and what you should be using based on your goal, there's a video linked in the description below. But what I mean by that is I used to go into, say, a heavy bench press as my first exercise, because in my head I was like, oh, I'm full of energy, and I'm going to be pushing it hard in the gym and so on. But ultimately, I was never warming up properly enough. So I used to just go into the gym, do a couple of warm-up sets, and then go straight into my heavy set. And I wondered why I wasn't progressing. Whereas if I'd done my isolations first, so if I'd, for example, warmed up my shoulders a little bit, my lats before I went into my heavy presses, my body would have been primed, my muscle would have been primed, and I would have been much more ready to sort of get used to a heavy weight. Whereas I used to say, if I was benching 120, I used to do a warm-up set of 60 of 3 reps. I used to do a warm-up set of 80 and then go straight into 120, and I'd be surprised why I couldn't lift the weight. Now, this next mistake leads me kind of onto the mistake that I've just talked about now, about doing compounds first. But I used to think that doing free weights was the way to get bigger muscles. And machines were just there as like, for those people who have no idea what they're doing in the gym. Completely wrong. Machines have their place and free weights have their place. And I know I've just mentioned it earlier, but go and watch the video in the description where I talk about free weights versus machines. And that will kind of give you a better understanding, because I don't want to go too in depth in this video. But for me, it was a case of doing barbell bench presses and squats and shoulder presses because they had big weights on them and they looked good, and that's what's going to grow muscle. No, it won't. Mechanical tension will ultimately grow muscle. And whatever you're going to do for that, whether that's free weights or machines, that's what's going to grow muscle, not how much weight there is on a bar or a specific exercise over another one. Now, this next mistake, I'm sure we've all been there, but half reps, regardless of what you are doing. Half reps. The worst, obviously, mistakes generally are on squats, on things like bench press, especially with dumbbells, where you're kind of not going all the way down because the weight's too heavy. But that was me when I was training. I watched some of my videos back and I used to think, oh, wow, I'm squatting to depth and all of this. And my weight used to just go up and up and up, whereas I was barely half repping it. But I used to think I was the man in the gym with 140 kilo on the bar. If you squat 140 kilos, you do not look like I looked back then. But in my head, it made sense. The more weight there's on the bar, the bigger my legs are going to get. Yes, to a degree, only if your form's correct and only if you execute it properly. Okay, so I've talked about mistakes sort of more related to the gym, but I now want to sort of switch direction a little bit and talk about food. And I used to try and outrun a bad diet in that sense. I used to go to the gym and think, if I lift loads of weights, I'm going to get bigger. I had no understanding of nutrition. I had no understanding how much protein I should be eating. I had no understanding how many calories I should be eating. Just that concept just didn't make sense to me. I just thought all that matters is what you do in the gym. Food's 20%, your training's 80%. We know that it's the other way around now, and obviously I've made my mistakes, but at the time that was something that I used to think, that all that matters is how heavy you lift in the gym and the kind of exercises you do and how much weight there's on the bar. No, how wrong I was. Food is one of the most important factors when it comes to training. And speaking of food, I used to cut carbs when I was training. I remember to this day, I was a carnivore for about 2 years and I used to train being a carnivore. And don't get me wrong, you were seeing some results because ultimately I was having a lot of energy for training. But the day I introduced carbs into my workouts, my squat went up by 20 kg, like that, without doing anything. From 1 week to another, I introduced carbohydrates and I was able to add 20 kg to the bar because it was like jet fuel. It was like I was on another level when it came to training, and my numbers just skyrocketed in the gym because I just didn't think carbs mattered. And as I said, because I was a carnivore for 2 years, that was one of the biggest mistakes I used to make. And with that said, I used to also not spread my protein throughout the day. So I used to have my protein at one time of the day and not spread it over 4 or 5 meals to kind of keep muscle protein synthesis going. I used to train in the morning, not eat until the evening, and then I'd have a big load of just meat and fats, and that was it. And as I said, introducing carbs and then spreading my protein throughout the day, it made the biggest difference to my training. And now my training just went up. And I know I said I'm leaving the biggest mistake to last, and here it is. I used to care what people think in the gym. That was the one thing that stopped me from pushing more. I used to go in and I used to be really nervous thinking that this person cares about what I'm looking like. And I used to think about my outfits. I used to think about everything more than I actually thought about my workouts. I used to think that I need to put a load of weight on the bar, and I used to think that I need to be lifting X and Y and squatting and benching and all this sort of stuff because other people were just looking at me. I was the center of attention. Nobody cares about you in the gym. You are the only person that cares about you. People are so petrified going to the gym that all they care about is making sure that they're okay. Nobody cares about you. Honestly, nobody does. I've done this with my clients before. I said, I used to go to the gym with them and I used to finish the session. I used to say, right, who do you remember? They couldn't remember anybody. They couldn't tell me a single person that was in that gym. And I said to them, that's exactly the same about them. They're exactly in that same position. Everyone's so worried about it in the gym, nobody cares about you. So don't let that stop you from doing the exercises that you should be doing rather than the ones that you think you should be doing to impress others. So I hope that video has been helpful, kind of giving you a bit of a history as to where I come from and where my training started and the kind of mistakes that I made. My whole goal is for you to not make the same mistakes again. So I hope that video has been helpful in that regard. Now, if you're interested in finding out more about nutrition, go and watch this video over here where I talk about my macronutrients and how to calculate your calories properly and how to get your proteins and carbs right. But other than that, thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.